Imagine you are sitting right here, across from me, and I am going to tell you exactly what society has spent the last few decades trying to hide from you. You've been lied to your entire life. The greatest, most destructive lie modernity has ever sold you is that women fundamentally desire a man who constantly talks about his feelings, who leads with pure, unfiltered vulnerability, and who meticulously explains every single thing he does to prove he is a good guy. I know exactly what you do. You have spent hours upon hours trying to use your sharp, analytical logic to fix things during a heated argument, desperately justifying every single one of your actions and intentions, only to watch her eyes grow ruthlessly cold. You watch the respect vanish in front of you like smoke, and you have no idea why. As a researcher of human behavior, I didn't learn this only from books. I observed it, studied it, and verified it across hundreds of cases. I have proven a brutal, unforgiving reality that goes against absolutely everything you have been taught by modern culture. The most magnetic, dangerous, and dominant thing you can possibly do for yourself is, simply, learn to shut your mouth. Think of a brilliant, highly anticipated psychological thriller you desperately wanted to watch, but someone carelessly spoils the ending for you in the first 5 minutes. You do not stay in the theater to watch a movie when you already know exactly how every scene concludes, do you? In human behavioral dynamics, absolute predictability is the ultimate kill switch for female biological desire, and the terrifying question you have never had the courage to ask yourself while looking in the mirror is this: why do you keep insisting on handing over the entire script to someone who only ever wanted the tension of the mystery? The real enemy that is actively destroying your romantic life isn't your physical appearance, your height, or the balance in your bank account. It is this pervasive, toxic myth born from modern therapy culture, the completely fabricated idea that uninhibited, endless communication solves everything. The brainwashing of pop culture, combined with a society that hands out participation trophies, has convinced you that you must constantly process your emotions out loud. It taught you to act essentially like a woman, turning the desperate need to vent and be understood into the very foundation of your character. But behavioral science, backed by the evolutionary frameworks of researchers like David Buss and Helen Fisher, proves the exact opposite. The human brain is biologically hardwired to rapidly devalue whatever it understands completely and without effort. When you vomit your insecurities onto her, falsely believing that you are building deep emotional intimacy, you are actually committing sexual suicide. You immediately downgrade yourself to the role of the platonic best friend, the emotional tampon, or a psychological rehab project, effectively killing any trace of masculine polarity. The man who does not master the sovereign stillness of keeping his mouth shut turns himself into a predictable, cheap paperback, quickly flipped through, understood in mere seconds, and inevitably discarded on a dusty shelf. Look at your own past and answer me with implacable honesty. How many times was your desperate, clawing attempt to be fully understood the exact trigger that made you be treated as completely irrelevant? Your frustration is real, your emotional exhaustion is entirely valid, and you are not wrong for feeling like the modern dating market is rigged against you. The post-feminist discourse told you to just be yourself, but your failure isn't a lack of conversational skills. It is your complete ignorance of a primal biological override in the female limbic system that you keep triggering without even realizing it. After years studying evolutionary psychology, I decided to break the code of silence and reveal the exact neurological engineering that nobody has ever had the courage to tell you. What I am going to show you now is not a petty game of playing hard to get. It is the pure biological framework behind strategic disappearance, the absolute mechanism of power that will force any woman's mind to work for you when you are not present. But before we descend into this clinical level of behavioral calibration, tell me in the comments, have you ever made yourself smaller to keep someone who never truly chose you? I read everything. Now, assume total responsibility for your past failures. Wipe your mind completely clean of what mainstream media has taught you and pay very close attention, because simply staying mute isn't enough. Doing it the wrong way, out of fear, makes you look terrified, like a deer caught in the headlights. True magnetic silence, the kind that radically alters her brain chemistry, relies on a cognitive rule called the Zeigarnik effect, and it functions exactly like this. The Zeigarnik effect, a well-documented phenomenon in cognitive psychology, proves that the human mind essentially collapses when trying to ignore a void. The brain becomes absurdly, almost painfully obsessed with incomplete tasks and missing information, rapidly forgetting anything that has already been fully delivered, explained, and finalized. It is exactly like a complex 1,000-piece puzzle that holds your undivided attention solely because the centerpiece is missing. And it is precisely within this psychological vacuum that your chronic pattern of acting like the quintessential nice guy ruins any chance you have of commanding respect. I didn't learn this only from books. I observed it, studied it, verified it across hundreds of cases, and I can tell you directly from the unapologetic perspective of female nature. Your constant passivity and your people-pleaser desperation will never, ever be viewed as a virtue. They are instantly interpreted by her biological radar as a glaring alarm of low genetic value, a total absence of leadership, and a tragic failure of masculine frame. When you hand over all your intentions on a silver platter, constantly trying to accommodate her just to avoid friction, you finish the puzzle for her. You assassinate the mystery. You completely eliminate the anticipatory anxiety that the Zeigarnik effect requires to thrive, and you aggressively unplug her involuntary attraction. The brutal truth is that this agreeable man behavior merely signals that you have zero boundaries, that your time is worthless, and that you desperately need external validation to justify your existence. It turns you into a walking biological repellent that no woman could ever organically desire. What behavioral science clearly shows us is that sexual tension relies entirely on implied danger and the deliberate information vacuum you leave behind for her to fill. Genuine attraction is triggered by the metaphor of loaded weapons. Female biological desire demands the presence of a man who possesses the capacity for controlled aggression, not unhinged violence or chaos, but the silent, formidable posture of someone who could react, a man who has strictly non-negotiable boundaries and who would never, under any circumstances, beg for anyone's presence. When you are always available, double texting that desperate paragraph of feelings while she responds with pure apathy or leaves you on read, you are effectively throwing your weapons on the ground and dropping to your knees. The practical application of the Zeigarnik effect in romantic relationships is ruthless. If you do not verbalize everything you are thinking and instead leave calculated, intentional gaps in your actions, you create a neurological enigma. This forces her brain to do the heavy lifting for you in your absence. The deliberate absence of your words fires up the search engines of her mind, whereas your needy, validation-seeking verbal diarrhea permanently shuts them down. Brother, look at your own life and answer with clinical honesty. How many times have you suffocated a woman's attraction by trying to be too present, only to realize too late that your extreme availability made her feel deeply bored and lose every ounce of consideration for you. The long-term consequence of living trapped in this prison of agreeableness is the complete and utter erasure of your masculine identity. The man who continues to insist on being harmless never earns anyone's genuine loyalty. He is merely used as a tool of convenience. You become the invisible man, the forgettable man, a boring safe harbor while she seeks the true visceral thrill in men who aren't terrified of contradicting her. In the real power dynamics of daily life, your validation-seeking behavior ensures you are treated like an intern in your own relationship, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid any displeasure. You swallow your own voice. You compromise on the small things just to maintain a fragile, illusory peace, and slowly, agonizingly, you watch her gaze transition from indifference to a quiet contempt masked as friendship. This is the silent agony of self-erasure. You think you are purchasing affection with your kindness, when in reality you are financing your own humiliation on an installment plan, castrating your personal sovereignty just so you won't have to sleep alone. You realize you've become a disposable background character at the exact moment your opinion ceases to carry any real weight for her. But sovereign silence doesn't just manufacture mystery, it ruthlessly exposes the invisible hierarchy that governs every interaction, and evolutionary biology proves that whoever opens their mouth first to justify themselves has just handed over their own crown. The raw, unfiltered truth is that the crown of your masculinity is stolen by your own hands every single time you open your mouth to try and prove your worth. A man's true value, in its most primitive and biological form, is measured solely and exclusively by his capacity to exist, move, and make decisions without requiring a single drop of external validation. This isn't cheap therapy talk or superficial self-help. It is an irrefutable neurobiological fact. After years studying this mechanism, what I am about to tell you will forever alter how you view every human interaction. Individuals who occupy the highest positions of hierarchy and status, whether we are looking at the primate troops studied by Robert Sapolsky or the multi-billion-dollar corporate boardrooms of the modern world, are exactly the ones who utilize the fewest words, take the longest pauses, and absolutely never offer unsolicited justifications. Biologically speaking, whoever talks the most is subconsciously trying to convince the tribe that they actually deserve to belong in that space. It is the exact difference between the anxious intern sweating through a 50-slide presentation, silently begging for the room's approval, and the CEO who approves or destroys the entire project with a single word spoken in a low, measured tone. Understand this once and for all. Every extra word you use in a desperate attempt to explain yourself automatically downgrades your social and sexual status in the eyes of her limbic system. You must understand the cold, mechanical reality of emotional detachment. The man who genuinely does not need external approval is the one who holds absolute control over any power dynamic. This happens because he becomes the emotional anchor of the relationship. He is that heavy, unshakable structure of iron that remains firmly planted at the dark bottom of the ocean, completely unaffected while the emotional chaos and storms of hysteria rage violently on the surface. When she tries to destabilize you, your sick addiction to adding a pathetic "it's because" at the end of every sentence triggers the dreaded law of justification. By doing this, you bleed out your power and instantly sound guilty, defensive, and submissive. You raise a defensive shield in the middle of nowhere, which serves only to prove to everyone watching exactly how attacked and fragile you actually felt. The cutting beauty of short, definitive sentences is a psychological territory you must learn to dominate with extreme urgency. The great minds of Stoicism, like Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, didn't write their philosophies to teach men how to complain. They wrote them to forge this exact internal anchor. And I ask you, looking directly into your eyes, when was the last time you acted from your own internal anchor, bearing the heavy, uncomfortable weight of silence, instead of babbling endlessly like a frightened little boy? The attempt to convince is the most lethal of all weaknesses, because the man who justifies himself assumes the position of an inferior, literally asking the environment for permission to exist. Consolidating your silent posture under extreme pressure is the first non-negotiable pillar for building your true personal sovereignty. Grounded, conscious silence is what separates the magnetic, high-value man from the easy, manipulatable prey. Tell me in the comments, have you ever made yourself smaller to keep someone who never truly chose you? I read everything. Pay very close attention and prepare your mindset for what comes next, because merely possessing the intellectual theory doesn't save you on the real battlefield. The gears of human attraction do not forgive the slightest slip in frame when you are faced with direct confrontation. The unbearable, hidden dynamics of desire conceal biological traps that you don't even suspect are active in your daily routine. And this is exactly where 99% of men dig their own graves. There is an exact fraction of a second where a woman tests whether you are the unshakable leader of the relationship or just the eager intern. And if you open your mouth in that exact millisecond, you lose her respect forever. And that critical millisecond happens right in the middle of the chaos she herself provoked. Stop trying to analyze the logical surface of her words and face what is actually happening right in front of you. Brother, wake up to reality. I am done drawing diagrams of communication theory for you. From this moment on, we are going to confront your practical cowardice. That classic argument scenario, where she suddenly shifts her tone of voice and attacks you with sudden, glaring emotional irrationality, is not a mistake. It is not a simple misunderstanding that can be solved with a flowchart. When you try to use logic to defend yourself against emotion, you are falling directly into the trap designed to destroy you. Every pathetic attempt to logically counter an irrational attack only broadcasts your neurological fragility to her. Biology documents your exact failure. When you react to the provocation, your cortisol levels spike, your heart rate increases, and your central nervous system demonstrates a glaring weakness. To the female brain, a man who loses his composure and enters into an argumentative panic is physically repulsive. Imagine a flawless matador in the arena facing immense danger. He doesn't attack the bull, he doesn't try to reason with it, and he certainly doesn't panic. He simply steps aside with a brutally cold movement of his cape, watching the beast exhaust itself in the dirt. Every time you try to conquer the chaos by opening your mouth, you stoop down to match her hysterical energy. Hold your breath right now, because the behavioral secret I am about to drop on you is going to shatter your illusions and rewrite your reality. The ultimate secret that modern society has tried so desperately to bury is that women create conflict on purpose. Unconsciously, her primal instinct instigates verbal chaos for one very specific reason: to verify if you have the backbone to not react to her. It is a primitive, evolutionary mate selection test designed exclusively to measure your stability under stress. She doesn't actually want you to solve the manufactured problem. She wants to verify if you crumble under pressure. When you dive headfirst into the hysteria, you match her feminine energy, completely exterminating your own authority in the process. Carve this raw formulation into your mind once and for all. She doesn't love you because you are a nice guy. She respects you because you are strong. And without respect, female love is biologically impossible. It is fundamental that you understand the brutal dynamic of the passing gates. The provocation is not a glitch. It is the screening protocol. It is the violent, uncompromising boundary that ruthlessly separates the common man from the sovereign man. The man who walks through that door is the massive rock in the middle of the ocean. He never argues with the storm trying to drown him. He simply breaks the emotional wave with his terrifyingly calm posture. Feel the disturbing relief right now of discovering that surgical inaction, anchored in calm, unwavering eye contact, instantly wins the conflict you always tried to win by being a talking puppet. I can already hear the gears of your male ego spinning in desperation, trying to manufacture flimsy, self-righteous excuses to keep failing in peace. You are going to tell me that if you stay quiet during an attack, you will look like a coward who just swallows disrespect, or that your character as an honest man demands that you put the truth on the table, no matter who it hurts. What a massive, childish, and entirely destructive illusion. Obstinately wanting to be right is the submissive man's participation trophy, an empty, pathetic victory that annihilates your dominant frame. You are so violently addicted to proving your flawless logic that you ignore the absolute massacre you are inflicting on your own masculine polarity with every single justification you vomit out. In your desperate attempt to present undeniable facts to a woman who is acting out of line, you castrate yourself in public. You forget the absolute golden rule of evolutionary biology. There is no primitive attraction without deep admiration, and there will never be a shred of admiration as long as you are begging to be heard in the middle of an emotional fire. Stop burning your non-negotiable value, trading her visceral respect for the futile validation of winning an irrational argument. What good is it to win a debate with impeccable arguments if your prize for being right is her feeling biologically repulsed by you? If you have made it this far, you are not the average viewer. There is a layer that goes beyond this video, exclusive, unfiltered clinical breakdowns that are not on the public channel. You can access it through the membership button below. And beyond the content, it is the most direct way to ensure these deep dives keep coming every week. The profound pain you feel absorbing this truth was not meant to be relieved. It was meant to be the solid foundation of your immediate reconstruction. The hardening of your character is not a rehearsed performance to look cold, nor is it a pathetic little theater of indifference that weak men use as a shield. It is the purest, most natural expression of a man who possesses an unyielding standard, a defined life purpose, and an absolute, unshakable awareness of his own market value. When you master the science of neurological unpredictability, your silence shifts permanently from defense to offense. Behavioral neuroscience vividly documents that variable and unpredictable rewards generate a dopamine spike up to 400% higher than rewards that are already expected. The slot machine is only addictive because the player never knows when the payout will drop. If it paid out predictably every single time, it would just be an exhausting, monotonous job. A man who knows exactly when to ration his attention and when to impose the heavy weight of silence becomes a massive source of involuntary attraction. He forcefully activates the biological switches of pre-selection. You don't just protect yourself, you flip the board entirely and transform yourself into a neurological addiction for her mind. Linking this magnetic unpredictability to your posture requires that you fully understand the brutal law of scarcity. The truly sovereign man never places any woman above his own personal mission, not out of calculated coldness, bitterness, or malice, but because reality proves that the world, and women themselves, severely punish the man who abandons himself in search of someone else's approval. Your personal sovereignty must be erected daily like an impenetrable fortress, built with thick stone walls where your attention is the rarest and most valuable resource in existence. Your attention should never be handed out freely like tap water. It must be treated like an 18-year-old single malt scotch. When your words and your presence become rare and surgical, they carry the weight of pure gold. In stark contrast, the talkative, predictable, and emotionally reactive man loses all impact. He is downgraded to mere white noise, like the constant, irritating hum of an old fan that her brain simply learns to tune out completely after 10 minutes. True power is born when you become completely untouchable at the center of your own world. I ask you now, looking at the absolute mess you have allowed them to make of your self-respect, have you built this impenetrable fortress, or do you continue leaving the front door wide open for anyone to walk in and trample over your value? It is completely impossible to negotiate loyalty at the bargaining table, just as it is biologically unviable to demand attraction using polite arguments or prolonged emotional venting. The raw dynamic of the reproductive instinct completely despises the rationality you try to impose to fix your shattered relationships. When you finally understand that your strategic disappearance and your sovereign stillness are the only tools capable of generating genuine obsession, your posture in the world changes permanently. You abandon the beggar's mentality and take a seat on the throne of your own existence, understanding that true authority never needs to be explained in order to be felt. Carve this absolute reality into your mind and let it dictate all of your future interactions from this moment forward. Female desire is never requested, it's triggered. If what I just explained resonated, subscribe to this channel. What you heard today is only the entry point. Every week I go deeper into a layer most men will never see. Understanding this unpredictability will make her think about you constantly and actively chase your approval. But to permanently armor your mind against the provocations that will inevitably come to test this new posture, you need to activate what I call the blackout protocol. The behavioral blueprint for this is simple, dirty, and utterly ruthless. The unbearable, crushing pain of shutting your mouth and taking control is infinitely superior to the illusory comfort of the modern lie of verbal vulnerability. Your only way out now is to surgically kill the weak man you've been trained to become, without a single drop of self-pity. What remains after accepting this reality is the absolute weight of the blindfold falling off, that brutal, cold, and completely solitary clarity that takes over a man after the definitive destruction of all his old romantic illusions. The protocol is deeply physical. You must activate the 3-second rule. Faced with any irrational provocation, pause, hold unbreakable, dead calm eye contact, and say absolutely nothing in response. This is the mute button in your mind, the sacred domain between the stimulus received and the response solemnly ignored. Without this clinical practice, you will go right back to vomiting words at the very first stress test. If you've made it this far, you already understand that the problem was never her, but the fake map you were using to navigate. You must implement this understanding immediately, using this knowledge while you still have the time to change the outcome.